Standing in the bridal suite of the Grand Astoria, the air felt heavy with the scent of expensive white lilies and the suffocating silence of a secret. My CEO, Kimberly, a woman known in the boardroom as the Ice Queen, was standing before the mirror with her back to me. Her wedding dress was a masterpiece of white silk, clinging to her like a fragile dream. "David," she whispered, her voice completely lacking its usual steel. "I can't reach it." I stepped forward, my heart hammering against my ribs. The zipper was caught halfway down her spine. As I reached out, my fingers accidentally brushed the warm, bare skin of her back, and a visible shiver ran through her. She didn't pull away. In that moment, I wasn't just her executive assistant, or a struggling single father who stayed up until 2 in the morning doing long division for my 7-year-old daughter, Lily. And she wasn't just my formidable boss. We were two people caught in a lie that was seconds away from becoming permanent. I gripped the small silver tab, leaned in close enough to smell the subtle vanilla on her skin, and asked the question that meant so much more than silk and thread. "Up or down?" She caught my gaze in the mirror's reflection, her eyes shimmering with a sudden, terrifying vulnerability. The next 10 seconds would decide the rest of our lives. I didn't start out as the person Kimberly trusted most. That title was earned through 18 months of impossible deadlines, icy silences, and a daily tightrope walk between high-stakes corporate survival and solo parenting. When I first joined Harrington and Cole Enterprises, I was desperate. My ex-wife had walked out 2 years prior, leaving me with a toddler, a mountain of unpaid medical bills, and a resume that had a gap I couldn't explain. Kimberly Harrington gave me a chance, not out of charity, but because I was the only applicant who didn't flinch during her 30-second silent interrogation. On my first week, I brought my daughter Lily to the office during an emergency childcare collapse. Lily was sitting in my cubicle, quietly coloring, when Kimberly stepped off the executive elevator. The entire 42nd floor froze. Kimberly walked straight toward my desk, looked down at Lily's pink crayon box, and then looked at me. "Is this a daycare, David?" Her voice cut like a scalpel. "No, Miss Harrington," I said, standing tall despite the cold sweat on my neck. "She'll be completely silent, and all your Q3 reports will be on your desk by noon." She stared at me for 4 agonizing seconds. Then she looked back down at Lily, who offered her a somewhat crushed blue crayon. Kimberly didn't take the crayon, but her jaw relaxed by a fraction of a millimeter. "No crayons near the leather chairs," she said cold-faced, and walked into her corner office. What followed was 6 months of relentless corporate battle. She was brilliant, cold, and flawless. But over time, the shift between us happened in quiet, unspoken ways. It was the rainy Tuesday night I was frantically trying to finish an acquisition memo while listening to Lily cry over the phone because she forgot her bedtime story. Kimberly walked out of her office, saw me wiping a stray tear off my cheek, and took the file right out of my hands. "Go home to your daughter, David," she said flatly. "I'll finish the appendix." The next morning, there were 2 cups of coffee on my desk, and a small plush teddy bear sitting right next to my laptop. No note. No explanation. That was her language, unspoken, fierce, and surprisingly gentle beneath the armor. By month 12, I was the only person who knew how she took her tea, when her migraines were coming on, and how her shoulders dropped exactly half an inch when she felt safe. And somewhere in those quiet late-night shifts, I had fallen completely, silently in love with her. But I knew my place. I was a single dad living in a rented apartment, she was the heiress to a billion-dollar empire. Then came Richard Calloway. He walked onto the 42nd floor on a crisp November morning without an appointment, carrying himself with the obnoxious confidence of a man who owned everything he touched. Richard was tall, polished, and had a smile that felt like a calculated weapon. "I'm here for Kim," he said, walking straight past my desk. When he went into her office, I noticed how Kimberly stood. Her posture wasn't her usual confident command, it was self-defense. Richard leaned over her desk, touching her shoulder in a proprietary way that made my fist clench beneath my desk. When Richard left, Kimberly stepped out. "Move my 2 o'clock meeting," she said. "Is everything all right, Miss Harrington?" I asked gently. She paused, a flicker of pain crossing her face. "He's my fiancé, David. We're announcing the corporate merger and our engagement next month." My heart sank. The Callaway merger was worth $400 million, but watching them together, I knew this wasn't love. It was a corporate transaction. The night before the wedding, it rained, a quiet, heavy pour that drenched the city streets. I was at my desk at 9:30 in the evening, finalizing logistics, when my phone buzzed. "Come to room 412 at the Grand Astoria. Please." I arrived in minutes. When she opened the hotel room door, Kimberly wasn't wearing her sharp suit or makeup. She wore a simple robe, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. She looked human, fragile, and utterly exhausted. "David," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "Richard has been siphoning money from Callaway Industries into offshore shell accounts. If this merger goes through tomorrow, Harrington and Cole absorbs all his hidden debt. It will ruin everything my father built." "Kimberly, you have to tell the board," I urged, stepping closer. "I can't without irrefutable proof," she whispered, looking up at me with tears brimming in her eyes. "If I call off the wedding without proof, the stock plummets and my family is disgraced. But if I marry him—" She stopped. She looked at me, not as her assistant, but as the one man who had stood by her through every storm. "You don't have to sacrifice your life for a corporate lie, Kimberly," I said softly, reaching out to gently touch her hand. "You don't have to carry this alone." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table while my daughter slept in the next room, cross-referencing 18 months of financial filings, routing numbers, and subsidiary tax documents. By 5 in the morning, I had built an airtight paper trail exposing Richard's fraud. At 8 o'clock, I knocked on room 412. She opened the door, already stepped into her wedding dress, a vision in white silk, paralyzed by fear and obligation. The zipper was stuck. I walked up behind her in front of the mirror. I could feel the heat of her skin, the fast beat of her pulse. My hand took the silver zipper tab. "Up or down?" I asked quietly in the reflection. With my free hand, I pulled out the folded financial dossier from my coat pocket and placed it on the vanity beside her. "That's his entire paper trail," I whispered near her neck. "It's clean enough for the SEC and the board's independent auditor. You have a way out, Kimberly. The zipper goes up if you want to marry him and live a lie, or it goes down, and we walk away right now." She stared at the file, then looked up into my eyes in the mirror. A tear broke past her lashes, but a breathtaking smile formed on her lips. Her hand reached back, gently covering mine on the zipper. Slowly, deliberately, she pulled my hand down. We didn't cause a scene. She changed out of the dress into a simple dark suit. We called the board auditor together from the hallway, delivering the evidence in a cool, precise 10-minute phone call. Half an hour later, as Richard Callaway was being met in the hotel lobby by legal counsel and board representatives, Kimberly and I walked out the side doors into the fresh morning air. The rain had stopped, leaving the city bright and clear. She stopped on the sidewalk, looking at me with a warmth I had dreamed of seeing for almost 2 years. "What happens now, David?" she asked softly. I smiled, holding the cab door open for her. "Now, we handle the board meeting. And then, I'd like to introduce you to Lily properly. She still has that pink crayon." Kimberly laughed, a full, beautiful laugh that echoed in the quiet morning air, and squeezed my hand tight. The Ice Queen was gone, and for the first time in both our lives, we were finally free. The weeks following the cancelled wedding were a blur of high-stakes corporate maneuvering and public shockwaves. When the news broke that the merger between Harrington and Cole and Callaway Industries was officially off, the business world was stunned. Rumors swirled through the financial district, but Kimberly remained immovable. Armed with the meticulous paper trail I had spent all night assembling at my small kitchen table, she stood before her father's board of directors with the calm, terrifying precision that had earned her the reputation of the Ice Queen in the first place. She laid out every shell company, every diverted transaction, and every falsified entry that Richard Calloway had crafted to hide his sinking financial empire. Beside her, I stood not just as an assistant taking notes, but as her partner in truth. The board had no choice. Legal proceedings were initiated against Richard within 48 hours, protecting the legacy Kimberly's father had built over 40 relentless years. Yet, away from the glare of camera flashes and executive boardrooms, something far more profound had shifted between us. The rigid boundaries that had governed our lives on the 42nd floor for 18 long months felt obsolete now. A week after the fallout began to settle, Kimberly showed up at my small suburban apartment unannounced on a quiet Saturday afternoon. She was wearing simple dark jeans, a cream-colored knit sweater, and white sneakers, a sight so far removed from her tailored blazers that my breath caught in my throat when I opened the door. In her hands, she held a brand new box of 64 colored crayons and a drawing notebook. Lily peeked out from behind my leg, her big brown eyes wide with curiosity, and for the first time, I saw Kimberly Harrington blush as she knelt down on the worn hardwood floor to hand the box directly to my daughter. I watched silently from the kitchen doorway, leaning against the counter as Kimberly sat cross-legged on the floor next to Lily, letting my 7-year-old teach her how to draw sunflowers without staying inside the lines. There were no press releases here, no balance sheets, no stock options, and no heavy silence of hidden truths. Just the quiet sound of laughter filling a small apartment that had felt lonely for far too long. That evening, after Lily had fallen asleep with her new teddy bear tucked under her arm, Kimberly and I stood on the small balcony overlooking the city lights. She leaned against the railing, the night breeze softly rustling her dark hair, and turned to look at me. I spent my whole life thinking that being strong meant standing completely alone. David, she whispered, reaching out to slide her fingers into mine. I thought if I let anyone see me vulnerable, everything would fall apart. I squeezed her hand, looking out at the sprawling skyline below us, knowing with absolute certainty that neither of us would ever have to stand alone again. The Ice Queen had left her armor behind in that hotel suite, and in its place, we had found something real, enduring, and whole. As the months turned into seasons, the corporate scandal slowly faded into yesterday's news, but the new foundation we were building only grew stronger. The office at Harrington and Cole took on a noticeably different atmosphere. The quiet fear that used to sweep across the 42nd floor whenever Kimberly walked past the elevators was replaced by a genuine, unspoken respect. She was still as brilliant and sharp as ever, dissecting bad proposals and commanding roomfuls of executives, but the icy wall was permanently gone. Staff members noticed her occasional smile, the warmth in her voice when she addressed people, and the way her eyes lingered on my desk whenever she walked through the double doors. We maintained our professional discipline during working hours, but the unspoken understanding between us had become the central pillar of both our lives. Outside the office, Kimberly seamlessly integrated into our small family unit. She became a constant, cherished presence in Lily's life, attending school plays, helping with science projects, and bringing over dinner on nights when corporate deadlines dragged on late. Watching the woman who managed a billion-dollar enterprise sit patiently at a small plastic table drinking imaginary tea with a 7-year-old girl was a transformation that never ceased to amaze me. One Sunday evening, as the sun was setting behind the city, casting a warm gold hue over the park where Lily was playing, Kimberly rested her head lightly against my shoulder. I used to think success was measured in quarterly dividends and acquisition graphs, she said softly, wrapping her arm around mine. But standing right here with you and Lily, I realize I spent years chasing numbers while missing out on life itself. I looked down at her, seeing the bright, unguarded happiness in her eyes, the same woman who had once stood terrified in a silk wedding dress holding the weight of her family's future on her shoulders. I kissed her forehead gently, holding her close as our daughter ran toward us with a handful of autumn leaves, calling out both our names with unbridled joy. The lie that had almost trapped us in that hotel room was now a distant memory, replaced by a reality built on absolute trust, shared strength, and a love that had grown quietly in the spaces between long working nights and cups of morning coffee. We had walked away from a corporate illusion to build something genuine, proving that sometimes, taking a leap into the unknown and letting the zipper go down is the only way to finally move forward together. Life has a way of coming full circle when you least expect it, presenting moments that remind you just how far you have traveled from where you started. A year after that rain-soaked night at the Grand Astoria, the annual corporate leadership gala was held in the very same hotel ballroom where Kimberly was once supposed to celebrate a hollow, deceptive marriage. This time, the circumstances could not have been more different. Harrington and Cole Enterprises was thriving, setting records for both ethical governance and financial growth under Kimberly's refreshed vision. I attended the event not as an anxious assistant hovering near the edge of the room with a clipboard, but as the head of the company's newly created corporate ethics division, a role Kimberly had insisted I take after seeing firsthand my unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Standing near the perimeter of the grand ballroom, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, I watched Kimberly from across the room as she interacted with industry leaders, board members, and international partners. She moved with an effortless grace that held the attention of everyone in her vicinity, but her eyes kept searching the crowd until they locked onto mine. When our gazes met, a subtle, beautiful smile crossed her face, a private signal meant only for me. She excused herself from the group of executives and walked across the polished marble floor directly toward me. "You look like a man who knows a secret," she murmured playfully as she reached my side, resting her hand softly on my arm in full view of the entire room. "I look like a man who knows he is the luckiest person in this building," I replied, turning my hand to interlock my fingers with hers. She laughed softly, the rich, genuine sound echoing above the ambient chatter and the distant notes of a grand piano. As the gala drew to a close late that evening, we took the elevator up to the top floor, stepping out onto the private roof garden overlooking the midnight skyline of the city. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain, much like the night everything had changed for us. Kimberly walked over to the stone balustrade, looking out over the sea of glittering city lights, her dark silk evening gown fluttering gently in the breeze. I walked up behind her, wrapping my arms securely around her waist and resting my chin gently on her shoulder, feeling her relax instantly against my chest. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come to room 412 that night?" she asked quietly, her voice full of reflective wonder. "Every single day," I answered honestly, pressing a soft kiss against her neck. If I hadn't answered that call, or if I hadn't spent that entire night digging through those financial records, we might still be living behind those glass partitions, pretending to be people we weren't. "You saved me, David," she whispered, turning around in my arms to face me directly, her dark eyes reflecting the warm golden lights of the city below. "You and Lily gave me a reason to stop hiding behind the ice." "You saved yourself, Kimberly," I corrected gently, cupping her face in my hands. "You were the one who had the courage to choose the truth over comfort. All I did was hold out a hand and ask you a question." She smiled, a deep, radiant expression of pure affection, and rested her head against my chest, right where my heart was beating steadily for her. Standing there on that high balcony above the world that had tried to define us, we knew that our journey was no longer about escaping a trap or surviving a corporate storm. It was about building a future grounded in honesty, family, and a devotion that had been tested in the darkest hours and had come out unshakable. A few months later, on a quiet Sunday morning bathed in warm golden sunlight, we gathered at a small stone chapel on the outskirts of the city for a private gathering with only our closest friends and family present. There were no press crews, no corporate board members, and no million-dollar flower arrangements lining the aisles. Lily walked down the small wooden aisle first, wearing a bright white dress and holding a flower basket with immense pride, scattering pink flower petals with a serious concentration that brought smiles to everyone present. When the doors opened again, Kimberly walked down the aisle toward me, wearing a simple, elegant ivory gown that radiated timeless beauty. As she reached the altar, she looked up at me with tears of pure happiness shimmering in her eyes. The minister spoke words of commitment, trust, and lifelong partnership, but the real vows had already been written between us long ago across months of shared late nights, unspoken support, and quiet courage. When it came time to exchange rings, Lily stepped up to stand between us, holding the small velvet box with high importance. Kimberly knelt down on one knee in her bridal dress, taking Lily's small hands in hers before looking up at me. "I promise to love, protect, and stand by both of you for the rest of my days," she said, her voice clear and strong. We exchanged rings under the gentle morning light filtering through the stained glass windows, marking the formal beginning of a life we had fought so hard to earn. As we walked out of the chapel together, hand in hand with our daughter between us, the cool morning air felt fresh, full of promise, and entirely ours. The single father who had once stayed up late worrying about how to pay bills and survive another grueling day at the office had found a true equal, a partner, and a loving mother for his child. And the brilliant CEO who had spent years guarding her heart behind icy corporate walls had finally found a home where she could be completely herself. Back at our new home, a spacious house surrounded by tall trees and a large backyard where Lily could run freely, we spent the afternoon celebrating with small, joyful moments that meant more than any formal banquet ever could. Friends laughed on the back patio, Lily chased our new rescue puppy across the lawn, and the sun slowly dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant shades of orange, purple, and gold. As twilight settled over the yard, Kimberly came out onto the porch carrying 2 warm cups of coffee. She handed one to me, stepping close so that her side rested against mine as we watched our daughter play under the warm glow of the garden lights. "2 cups," she said with a gentle smirk, nudging me playfully with her shoulder. "One for you, and one for me." "Just like every morning that brought us here," I replied, taking a sip and putting my arm around her waist. She leaned her head against my shoulder, letting out a long, contented sigh that carried no weight, no fear, and no lingering ghosts from the past. "Up or down, David?" she whispered softly, her voice filled with quiet amusement as she looked up into my eyes. "Down," I said without a second of hesitation, smiling down at her. "Always down to reality, where we stay grounded together." She smiled, kissing me softly as the stars began to appear in the clear evening sky above us. The journey from that tense corporate office on the 42nd floor to the quiet warmth of this porch had been long, challenging, and filled with uncertain steps, but every single challenge had led us exactly where we were meant to be. We had faced the corporate intrigue, dismantled the lies, and chosen the terrifying uncertainty of truth over the comfort of a golden cage. Standing there with my wife and my daughter, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of the night, I knew that our story was no longer about surviving the past, but about embracing every beautiful, unpredictable moment of the future we were building hand in hand.